This is going to be a big one. Is LGBTQIA+ one big family, or is it actually erasing what it means to be gay? Let's talk about it. Hi guys, it's Jack. Welcome back to my channel, and I am very glad to have you here with me. So today I want to talk about a very sensitive and tough topic. Is trans activism the new homophobia? And erasing what it means to be gay and the progression we've made. Now I want to make one thing clear. I am talking specifically about the toxic trans activism we see in online discourse, at protests, forcing women not to speak, deplatforming people losing their jobs because of it all, and basically having the idealistic tendency to feel that if we disagree with anything you say, we are transphobic, inciting violence, people are more likely to delete themselves because we are pushing back on a certain idea. Everything that subscribes to this insane gender ideology and trying to completely upend society and what it means to be a man and a woman. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about all trans people, by no means. I support trans people who need to transition in the cases where it may be right for them. I recognize that some do this and they have a very happy and fulfilling life. And I also support it in the context of providing thorough therapy, part of that being, can we help you be comfortable in your sex? And if that doesn't work, and through lots of other stuff, exploring comorbid problems, other mental health issues, then transition might be the right decision. But obviously that's not what the landscape is totally like. There's not really any gatekeeping. And we have these very strong voices in the space which are dictating how we are allowed to think. They are redefining words, and they are opening up a very scary and sinister space where gay kids are potentially being harmed as a result. So that is what I would like to speak about today. Let's start where I feel this all began. So Stonewall is a very well-known LGBT charity who were mainly fighting for the rights of gay and lesbian people. And until they won marriage equality for both in the US and the UK, they hadn't really gone into the trans sphere. But that all changed from 2014 on. So a meeting was set up with trans professionals, campaigners, and activists to discuss the possibility of Stonewall becoming trans inclusive. They then announced in February 2015 that it would now be campaigning for all of the LGBT community and was beginning a path to trans inclusion. So it sounds pretty great at first, right? Why can't they also advocate for trans people and what they need? I agree with that. But they then received trans-inclusive training from Gendered Intelligence, and I have many problems with that organization. Stonewall also established a trans advisory group to steer Stonewall's integration of trans equality across all charities, campaigns, and programs. So what was once the pride flag for gay, lesbian, and bi people has now become the Pride Progress flag. And I used to kind of like this, but I do inherently see an issue with it now because they are lumping a lot of stuff in together. And I'm not someone who thinks that the T should be separated, because lots of us go through similar experiences growing up of coming to terms with things, dealing with gender non-conformity and what that means, bullying, harassment, etc. But this Q plus and everything, it's muddied the waters. It's made us way too difficult to understand. These charities are businesses. They're there to make money and they need to turn a profit. And if they get everything they want, then they have to say, okay, what else can we do? So now they've gone so far, even intersex. Like, I really have an issue with that because someone has a medical condition, they have ambiguous organs or their chromosomes don't match their organs, they don't necessarily want to be part of a political movement, an LGBTQ. I mean, my experience to an intersex person, because I'm same-sex attracted and they have a disorder, a physical disorder, and there's nothing wrong with that. But is it part of what I am and what trans people are? People don't understand all of this stuff. There's also a very poor understanding of what intersex actually is. So I'll get into that another time. Along with this activism and Stonewall subscribing to all these ideas, they've also started to rewrite LGBT history. And this has happened in many publications. So in 2020, the New York Times, transgender woman Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera led the uprising at Stonewall Inn 51 years ago. But they were never put at the center of the movement they helped start, one whose very shorthand, the gay rights movement, erases them. So this is inherently incorrect. Marsha P. Johnson did not throw the first brick at Stonewall. Marsha P. Johnson was not trans. This person was a transvestite. And Marsha says this themselves, Marsha's self.
I could tell him I was a boy and I was in drag. I can't believe that you're a boy. That I know this man couldn't believe I was a real woman, honey. I'm just a transvestite.
Trans activists will look at the past and say, oh, well, that person was trans, but because it wasn't known back then, they didn't have a word for it. You can't decide that. It was not trans activists that started the Stonewall riots. And Fred Sargent, who is a well-known gay activist, he participated in the Stonewall riots in 1969. And he was one of the 4 co-founders of the first gay pride march in New York City in 1970. And he debunks this. And even Marsha debunks this. How is this even an issue?
I was uptown. I didn't get downtown till about 2 o'clock. Because when I got downtown, the place was already on fire and it was a raid already.
Why are we trying to rewrite gay history when Marsha literally says, I wasn't there? You can't just decide, oh, this person was probably trans, so we're going to use them. And we're also going to flip the narrative and rewrite history to somehow make gay and lesbian people indebted to trans activists. No, I'm not indebted to anyone, so don't put that on me. Don't appreciate it. Rewriting LGBT history is one thing, and we're not necessarily causing anyone individual harm. What is worse is there are many gender non-conforming gay and lesbian children now being transitioned medically, having irreversible damage done, and essentially transing away the gay. So gender non-conformity has long been known to be present in gay and lesbian kids. And this is more proof that gender is not a social construct, because in my case, I was being socialized as a normal boy. I was in a society where other boys were heteronormative. I didn't have any reason to be gender non-conforming and effeminate.
I have countless friends who have reached out to me over the years saying, you know, Deborah, if I were growing up now, I probably would have transitioned, because this is such a common thing when you are a young child who is likely going to grow up to be gay. You tend to be gender atypical and have interests that are gender atypical and friends of the opposite sex.
Many gay boys recall wanting to play with their sisters' Barbies over cars. They didn't want to play with guns. Lesbians talk about how they were a tomboy and they had a lack of interest in stereotypical feminine activities such as hair, makeup, nails. They often preferred wearing boys' clothes as well. But you may ask, surely there's more to being trans as a kid than just this stuff. But the problem is that as a society, they have dumbed it down so much that they are advising parents, doctors, and therapists to recognize gender dysphoria and being trans in kids as some of these traits. Signs your kid is trans. Notice if your child has gender non-conforming tendencies. If your child consistently displays a strong preference for things that don't conform to gender expectations, it could be something to keep an eye on. A child who is different in lots of ways and shows extreme unhappiness at being forced, keyword there, I'm going to come back to that, to act like the gender they were assigned at birth is probably transgender. Probably. Oh yeah, they're probably. They may be trans if they only play as characters of the gender opposite to their assigned sex. For instance, if your child was assigned male but only dresses as female characters while playing dress up and refuses to dress as male characters, or if they insist on dressing as a girl boy even when not playing. None of this suggests that someone would benefit from medically transitioning to the opposite sex. Unhappiness at being forced. So if you are a young gay boy who is very effeminate, likes to play with dolls, likes to wear sparkly things, and your parents force you not to, then of course you're going to be unhappy. If they enroll you in football and rugby and like these sports with other boys that are rough and they hate it, then of course they're going to be unhappy. But you don't look at that and say, oh, well, that means you're probably trans. Look for signs. Insisting on shopping in the girls and boys section, preferring friends of another gender, becoming upset over haircuts even if they are born male, asking for shorter, more frequent haircuts if they are born female, frequently pretending to be a book or movie characters of the other gender, hating their genitals, being much happier when you let them do something related to the gender that they express. So you can see, apart from possibly hating their genitals, and you know, many people have problems with their body. So that's not exclusive to gender dysphoric people. And it can be odd for an adolescent to kind of grapple their sexual body parts. Everything here is based on gender stereotypes. It's so trivial that you're now advising parents, oh, these are the signs to look out for. So if you notice these, they're probably trans. I felt so uncomfortable with the role that was sort of available to me in society as a boy growing up in the west of Ireland. And while my parents never pushed me away from things that I liked, I still felt immense shame and secrecy over wanting to do things that girls preferred over what, boys typically do. So my mother tried enrolling me in things like sports, soccer, basketball, and I absolutely dreaded going there. I can still remember the pit in my stomach and that feeling when I was bracing myself to go to those activities, even as early as the morning, like on a Tuesday morning. I was like, oh God, it's that day. And then as soon as I was over that hump, I was so much happier. So I felt alienated from other boys. It was like we spoke a complete different language, right? I felt disconnected from my body and very socially awkward as a result. I'm a very confident extrovert person now, but because of this experience, I grew up feeling very socially awkward. And that is how I presented at school. I was second guessing myself. I was not confident. Like anyone would think that I'm just this introvert, this shell of a person. And I felt revolted at the thought of getting muddy or dirty in the rain. That was just awful to me. And I also wanted to constantly be presented neat and tidy. So I never wanted dirt on me. I was very hypersensitive to anything like that. Even when you wear like Wellington boots and go out and go in the mud, I wouldn't even like that sensation. It was just like too dirty for me. When my mother finally was kind of like, okay, what activities are we going to get him to do? She was like, okay, I'm going to try him out in a dance class. And I was just in my element, fell in love with it instantly, and I did not look back. This led to my eventual pursuit of a career in musical theatre, which is why I moved to the UK. And while I have moved on from that, it was an integral part to my whole childhood and adolescence. And you can associate these activities with more femininity, like singing, dancing, expressing yourself, using your body in that way. Not that it's only exclusive to gay people, but you do see a huge majority in the musical theatre industry of gay men. Sometimes there's more gay men than straight men in a cast in a musical, and that is typical. All my friends in school were girls. I never had any close male friends until I reached adulthood. Shocker, they're all gay except one. So that was when I really started to relate to other men. I guess with girls, I was more drawn to them because I related a lot more to their empathetic, more gentle and nurturing nature. And I feel like our sense of humor and the way we saw the world was also very similar. I didn't see myself in other boys at all. I found their behavior extremely perplexing, and I felt very intimidated and fearful when I was around just a group of boys. While all my friends were girls, there were always these scenarios in which society separated girls and boys. So then I was naturally separated from all my friends and thrust into scenarios where it was all boys, and I hated that. Looking back on all of this, you could say that some of these feelings I had were dysphoric. It made me feel very uncomfortable, very fearful, very anxious. It was all related to my gender role and what the role of other boys were, stereotypically. And it's nothing against them really, because they were obviously being in their element, but they were the norm and I was the exception, and I didn't have anyone like me. And one of the worst times is when I had to share a changing room with boys, and I felt such intense distress and embarrassment over this. I was so scared of people seeing me naked. And I also really dreaded the male development of my body hair and the thought of getting facial hair and having to shave. Now, I don't know if that's anything to do with sort of uncomfortability with masculinity or my gender, because straight boys might feel that as well. But it's just something I recall. I guess beyond that, I wasn't necessarily dysphoric about my body. If I ever engaged in sort of rough and tumble play, or when I was forced to, I remember in secondary school, we had to do these judo lessons, and that was the worst periods. It felt way too intimate, and I felt so uncomfortable. And, I've fallen in love with boys, like I'm with a boy. So it goes to show that if you had put a boy and a girl together, they would have had the same reaction, like this is not appropriate. And that is exactly how I felt. In terms of interest, I was obsessed with pop bands. I related far more to females than males. When the Spice Girls were big, I used to kiss a photo of Baby Spice every night. I wanted to be like her. And when I got into S Club 7, I was obsessed with Rachel Stevens. And none of those things were because they were hot or anything like that. Well, obviously, because, I couldn't see myself in any male role models. And even male role models or male people in the media who were coming out as gay, like in soaps and, Pop Idol, like that kind of stuff. And it was kind of kept secret. I had an aversion to that because society was teaching you that homosexuality is something to be shameful for. So I didn't let myself go there and say, oh, I identify with that person. And if I saw a man being very feminine, like I used to recoil at that as a child because I was sort of taught that that's not okay. My parents didn't try and curb my gender nonconformity, but a lot of it was influenced by school and the media. Like, I didn't let myself go there, if that makes sense. As a teenager, I listened to Christina Aguilera, Katy Perry, Rihanna, Saturdays, guilty pleasure, and I absolutely loved America's Next Top Model. And I felt so much shame and guilt over wanting to watch that. And now I'm thinking like, oh my God, there was nothing wrong with you watching that. These are just a range of examples. It's so important to note that if I was ever forced as an effeminate, non-conforming boy into soccer, playing with trucks, having male friends, then that would have caused me intense unhappiness. If you think about it, if a kid is pressured into a gender role, and while gender is not a social construct, you can still be pressured into one. That's wrong. You shouldn't pressure people into that. If someone feels so misaligned with the gender role that's being forced upon them, to a little kid who, thinks somewhat black and white, what would make more sense? They'll probably say, well, if I want to do these things, I wish I was a girl. If I'm so different, maybe I must be a girl. What if I was supposed to be a girl? Life would be so much easier if I was just one of the girls. And these thoughts can occur subconsciously when you're that young, when you're 3-4 years old. I'm just thinking if I was living today as a kid and having all this gender nonconformity and then gender ideology pushed on me, then of course I would have started to question things. And would I be considered trans?
There's nothing you as a parent can do to change your kid's gender identity. While most people don't have a sense of their sexual orientation until middle or high school, children do start to understand their gender identity as early as 3 years old. Deep inside, they have a sense that boy or girl isn't the right category for them.
So this commercial is just utter BS. How often do kids see a man in a wig and think, oh, that's a woman? They identify the opposite sex with very simple markers like this.
But the other thing I would say is that gender dysphoria is something that society creates. So there's not a set amount of gender dysphoria. There's not a set number of people who are likely to develop gender dysphoria. If you live in a society where gender roles are very strict and where the only way that you can do things that you really want to do is by pretending to be the opposite sex, or if we encourage these things by certain sorts of pornography or so on, you're going to see more gender dysphoria.
So you can see the idea that discrimination and segregation and forced gender roles could come first, and then gender dysphoria can come next. You can also imagine how having these intense feelings and that all the things you want to do are more associated to females and female bodies, it could lead to a disassociative feeling from your own sexed body, and it can lead to you hating your body. Now you're going to think that's a stretch, but imagine a girl who grows up having no issue with her body and then is thrust into adolescence and social media, and then suddenly she's being compared, she's being judged, and then she develops body dysmorphia. So that is a direct product of the society in which we live.
When I look back at old photos of me when I'm younger, I didn't care about the way I looked, I didn't care what people thought of me. And then social media came into my life and I became a completely different person. And I think you can tell that from my pictures now. The night we won X Factor, I think I had about 101 inbox messages on my Facebook. And the first one that come up was from some random man. And he was like, "You are the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. How on earth were you ever put in this girl band? You deserve to die." And then the next day, the first interview that we had, the lady come in and she said, "Have you seen what's been said about you online, Jessie? Katie Hopkins just basically called you fat. I could be the skinniest girl in the world and this is never going to go away."
The whole world had an opinion on me and they weren't good ones.
My brain started to believe everything that people were saying about me.
So what's the difference here with Jessie Nelson is that her family, her friends, they did not hear these feelings at any point and affirm her and say, "You're right, you are big, you need to lose weight, you are ugly, you should probably get surgery, let's get you on a diet." But no. Imagine growing up as a gender non-conforming boy and other boys in school constantly calling you a sissy, a girl. That's another thing. They can keep calling you a girl. And even your parents can reject the fact that you're not the son they thought you'd be. Pretty soon, you could start believing it. So now we see lots of very young kids who may otherwise have just been gay being seen as trans.
Tell the truth now. Do you want to be a boy?
No,
How do you know?
because it's boring stuff, and most of the boys play football and stuff. I didn't want to.
You don't want to play football?
Yeah, and I didn't like getting hurt.
So, you're happy with how we treat you?
So you can see this child's understanding of what it means to be a boy is just not liking boy things, not liking football, the exact sentiments I had. The whole thing is led by the father. He says, and you're happy with the way we treat you? As a question, but that's a leading question. You're encouraging the child to go, yes. I think this is literally child abuse. Like a child who's like 7 years old and you just transition them.
I really didn't want to be a boy. I feel like I'm in the wrong body.
Why you wanted to wear girl clothes?
I wanted to just see how it looked and see if anyone laughed or not.
I wanted to see if anyone laughed or not. So it was directly impacted by how other people would view the child.
When I started wearing girls' clothes to school, I felt much better because I sort of am a girl and now it's a fairy, and my friend was a footballer.
As you grow up a bit, you might change your mind? How do you know?
Because I'll just have girl clothes and never forget about anything, because girl things are all over my room and I have a bunch of Hello Kitty things.
It's very regressive, isn't it, to think girls equals dolls, dresses and Hello Kitty. But this is exactly what all of these professionals are using as a guide to determine if a kid is trans.
One of those transgender people?
Yes, because I'm turning into a girl.
I don't get it. This boy literally just looks like a gay kid.
I was 4, watching Barbie and the Pink Shoes, and I was like, I want to be a ballet dancer. And then when I started doing ballet, that's when I was like, I want to be a girl.
Oh yes, because only girls can do ballet.
When people ask me if I'm transgender, yeah, I am. But I just normally want to think that I'm just a girl.
How many times did a kid say, I'm a boy, or they just put on a dress and said, now I'm a girl? It's a false promise to this child that they can do this, and then the whole world will just see them as that gender. Because there's always going to be people, arguably a large portion of society, who doesn't subscribe to that, doesn't think men can be women and women can be men. So it was well known in the past that up to 90% of kids with gender dysphoria would desist. So they would grow out of it during puberty.
Every single mainstream news piece pretty much said that the best way forward for children who are gender dysphoric, so they feel they're more like the opposite sex than the sex that they were born as, for them was to socially transition at a young age, younger being better, and that once they did transition, they flourished. You know, parents would say that they're doing so much better. But from a scientific perspective, all of the research literature suggests that it's actually better for these children to wait until they reach puberty. There's a very, very high chance that they're going to outgrow the way they feel. They're more likely to grow up to be gay in adulthood.
But trans activists will just insist that these studies are bogus, and they don't have any logical arguments to debunk them. They just say, oh, well, those have been debunked. And they'll cite studies themselves, such as the Dutch protocol, which was the first trial of puberty blockers, and it was completely inconclusive. It didn't even have concrete results that kids benefit from this. But then that became the basis for prescribing puberty blockers everywhere. And the Dutch people were like, wait, hang on, we don't have any definitive answers over this. And what's more is that medical institutions and doctors now have a financial incentive to do this. So there's many factors at play. Whole trivialness of recognizing these traits in a kid and going, oh, right, that means you're the other sex. How regressive is that? And it's so sexist. Not only are kids being lied to, but we're telling them that they're a girl or a boy, and then they're being put onto a pathway of medicalisation, surgery, infertility, sexual dysfunction, and more. The list goes on, complications. And in that first clip with Louis Theroux, he followed up on this kid 5 years later, apparently still a thriving transgender girl and ready to go on puberty blockers. So you can see, oh, well, that's proof that, you know, you're wrong. This kid is not gay and is actually trans. Who knows? Maybe that is correct. I'm not saying that no kids are trans or will grow up to still have gender dysphoria, because it's also well known that that is the case. I'm not erasing all trans people and saying they're gay. When we don't allow a kid to go through puberty, this could be the very mechanism that will allow them to grow out of it, because their sexual hormones start working, things come online, they start getting those urges.
Why don't you want to go through puberty?
Don't want to be a girl.
Again, being given this false promise that if they don't go through puberty, they will not be a girl. Like the child says, I don't want to be a girl, but you'll always be a girl. You can't change your sex. It's scientifically impossible. Some kids believe that it's possible. And of course, this child would still be identifying as trans because they adopted the identity so young. And then as soon as they do, they are now able to adopt all the activities they like, all the behaviors they like. They have no reason to just abandon that. And also for kids that come out in school, socially transition, it can be very difficult to go back on because it's embarrassing. It can cause a whole host of issues with losing friends. Of course, the child is ready to go on puberty blockers. We can just block your puberty. No problem. It's ridiculous. Not only is this dangerous, but there are no long-term studies over the effect of this, whether they actually make people happier, what sort of long-term complications kids have from never going through their natal puberty. And I'm someone that does believe that puberty is a human right. I think this can be considered child abuse in a lot of cases. And who will know what will happen in 20, 30 years? These kids who've never gone through their natal puberty, it's a complete experiment. We're experimenting on a lot of gay kids, trying to turn them into like straight kids. It's ironic how trans activists will lobby for this ban on conversion therapy, which seems great at a surface level. This is also a ban on explorative therapy, not affirming a child straight away in their conclusions, helping them try and become comfortable in their biological sex. It also means no child knows for sure. But now the narrative is every child knows who they are. They fail to recognize that medicalizing many of them is actually gay conversion therapy. So that's the irony.
Transitioning now, I consider, and I think many in the field would agree, that it is like the new conversion therapy, where if you have a healthy gay child who, say you have a little boy who's very feminine, I think some parents have a sense there's a chance he's going to grow up to be gay. So if he's attracted to men when he's older, if he transitions to female as a child when he grows up, he's going to be or appear to be a straight woman.
In the journalist Hannah Barnes' book, Time to Think, where she examined the scandal and downfall of the Tavistock Centre, the gender clinic in London, she stated that GIDS clinicians raise concerns again and again. Are we medicating traumatized children, autistic children, or children who might grow up to be gay, who are disgusted by their desires, or whose parents would consciously or not, and for reasons including religious, prefer their offspring to be straight? It might well be unbelievable some parents would prefer a trans child to a gay child. Several clinicians described a father openly weighing up the best outcome for their son, a gay man or a trans woman. Another had said there were families who could not tolerate their son being gay. The child sees trans as a way out of this dilemma, and the family pressurizes the child to go along with this.
Every single young person that was referred to them in 2012, of the ones they have data for, which is the sort of the older ones, they didn't ask the very young kids, 90% of the girls identified as either same-sex attracted as well or bisexual, and 80% of the boys. It was just not seen as a thing, like the gender identity was what mattered.
Real accounts of stuff that happened in a clinic in the country in which I live. Although clinicians raised concerns time and time again, they would be called troublemakers and then driven out. They would give up. And some of them said that they couldn't sleep. There's no more blatant examples of homophobia than this. And the worst part of it all was that there was even a dark joke among staff that there would be no gay people left at the rate GIDS was going. Like, the fact that people were saying this on the reg as a dark joke and then the clinic just kept going along. Wow.
And I've spoken to young people themselves. There's a case in the book, Harriet, who said, I was a lesbian, and it was so obvious. I went into my GIDS assessment, and they talked about the first relationship that I'd had with a girl, and I felt really ashamed about it because she wouldn't talk to me in public. And I've never been attracted to a boy, and all that was ignored.
I listened to her tell this story, and I just sat there and I thought, oh, hell, they are sterilising gay kids.
As you all know, the rates of detransitioners are rising, many of which are now left with debilitating issues in such a young age for the rest of their life.
Kira Bell was born female and transitioned aged just 16. She was prescribed puberty-blocking drugs, but regretted the decision 6 years later following a double mastectomy.
Yeah, so I was dealing with a lot of issues at the time regarding my sexuality and just general mental health, really. It wasn't long. It was about 4 appointments before I was referred for puberty blockers, and it basically just snowballed from there.
In gay as well at the same time. Why was it that the Tavistock didn't explore these other aspects of what might be going on there?
The extent of the political influence at the time, but it was definitely beginning to happen.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you. I was 25 when I started the process and 26 when I medically transitioned. And I had the surgery 2 days before my 31st birthday. So I was a fully developed adult, fully developed brain, as they say, but I had all the vulnerabilities that Kira had too. I was gay. I had severe OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, severe depression. I had a history of bullying at school. I've got multiple medical professionals not just telling you that this is the route, this is the best thing for you, this is the best pathway, and you really do eventually start to believe it.
I was grappling with my sexuality, and I thought I was a lesbian at the time. And frankly, I felt like my mom wouldn't tolerate me or, associate with me if I got into a relationship with a woman as a woman. Well, instead of being a lesbian, why can't I be a straight man?
It's not like I always had gender dysphoria since my childhood, or that I ever felt like the opposite sex. For me, it started in my teenage years. And the reason why I choose to call it gender dysphoria, even though I'm not trans, is because I don't think gender dysphoria is something that is exclusive to trans people. I experienced a lot of bullying and a lot of homophobia in my young years, especially in secondary school. That was an absolute nightmare to get through. 3 of some of the worst years of my life. So I was bullied relentlessly throughout those years. I was called a fag, a bitch, and all of that. And at that point, I didn't even know I was gay, but it seems that everyone knew before I did, and was just making fun of me for that reason.
And another place we see this erasure of gay people and why kids are being led down this pathway is in schools. There's a lot of indoctrination to gender ideology in schools, and making kids, because they're non-conforming, question what their gender is and then decide, oh, well, I must be something else.
That's what I fucking teach in the classroom, okay? I always say give it to your friend, not your mom, because f*** your mom.
That's my major problem with school. I really don't do anything unless I actually want to do it. And most of the time, I don't want to do anything at all.
I'm a preschool teacher, so instead of using Mr. or Miss, we use mix. So the kids have been really awesome doing that. I work with 3- and 4-year-olds.
I'm Jack. My pronouns are they, them, and I identify as trans and non-binary. Here are 3 things you can do to support trans children in your school. Teach children about pronouns, what they are, how we use them, and why they're important.
First and foremost, what are my pronouns? Y'all respect those pronouns? Yes. I feel like some people think that, for whatever reason, some kids don't respect the pronouns, and I'm like, it's not y'all that don't respect the pronouns, it's people on social media who, can't gather that, you know what I mean? So
when babies are born, the doctor looks at them and they make a guess about whether the baby is a boy or a girl based on what they look like.
So this image of the scale, more like a Barbie, you're probably a girl. If you're more like that, you're probably a boy. How trivial. On one hand, children are encouraged to be gender neutral, and we're told that any differences between boys and girls are purely socially constructed. These two things, they're coming from the same left space, and those people just don't realize, oh wait, so gender is a social construct and gender doesn't exist, but then we're saying, if your kid likes dolls, then they're trans. Then we have this picture of the unicorn. Woo! And looks super cute at first, right? And it's interesting how they separate gender identity and expression, because you explain it and say gender identity is the intrinsic sense of who you are. Expression is how you express yourself. But then when you say explain gender identity, what does it mean to feel like you're a man or feel like a woman? Then it always goes back in a circular effect to the expression. So these things are not entirely capable of being separated, and it's doublethink. It makes you believe they are separate entities. And while this is cute and has nice visuals, it can be the beginning of bringing an otherwise gay child down this path of sterility, castration, and then this gender galaxy. So you can see assigned sex is entirely separate from all the rest, and then look at all these other exciting gender identities, and oh wait, where's being gay, lesbian, bi, which are all far more common and make a lot more sense than agender and gender queer. They're all just the same thing. Look at the sexuality galaxy at the top right. Apparently, gay and lesbian no longer means same-sex attracted. Lesbians are women attracted to other women, right? Gender ideology says different.
Because technically, the lesbian flag has changed to an orange stripe for non-men, such as myself. I still identify as a lesbian. I'm still here.
Can I ask you how you identify as a lesbian when you're not a woman?
Because I'm a non-man. Because
that's a terrible definition, in my opinion. But
I believe in including everyone.
You guys are accepting more,
Absolutely.
Everything like that. So where's the line then? Because then we have straight people. So then why have a community if everybody's in the community?
If you self-identify in the community, then we're all there for each other.
When did sexuality become your identity? Sure, it can be a part of your identity. Being gay is a part of how I see myself, but it is not my identity. I can't just decide to identify into it. The same people that will cry cultural appropriation if someone dresses up as a character like Pocahontas for Halloween. They're not saying they are Pocahontas or dressing up as her. They will get really mad at that, but then yet you're allowed just to identify yourself into being lesbian, and somehow that's okay.
That's what lesbian is. A non-man loving a non-man.
Possibly the most misogynistic, sexist thing that I've ever heard, that a lesbian is now considered a non-man. And this directly implies that being a woman is just the default. And you never hear people saying that I'm a non-woman. It's always focused on females, right? And a lot of these non-binary people, far more of them are female. And there is a problem with misogyny. Why would some women not want to identify out of that? How can you be a logical, sensible woman and happily say, I'm a non-man? What? We don't call black people non-white. So in my opinion, if you want to subscribe to all the non-binary craziness, go for it. But you can have it both ways. If you're not a woman and you're now a non-man or non-binary, then create your own sexual orientation. Go. By this logic, Sam Smith and Jonathan Van Ness, both non-men because they're non-binary, you could say this is a lesbian couple. I don't see what erases lesbians more than that. Surely, if lesbians are non-men, the pronouns are still just she and they, right? No.
Lesbians can use he, him pronouns.
When you're saying use he, him pronouns, at first everyone assumes it's their gender, sexual orientation, everything. I think it goes back to my belief that pronouns do not equal your gender.
Why are we also being more confusing? Yeah. The only thing that winds up doing is making yourself feel better.
If you are a lesbian and you want to use he, him pronouns, like what are you gaining from that? What is the goal? It's bizarre. It doesn't seem like you have any authenticity or integrity about you. Like the world will laugh at you for doing that. It's like adopting something that has zero value or logic just to be seen as unique. It's something different. Yeah, I was assigned female at birth, but now I'm non-binary. I used to use them. Now I use he, him pronouns. And I also identify as a lesbian and queer. Babes, do you have any hobbies? Or perhaps, do you need to go on vacation, have a break? Are you okay? Lesbian bar in 2000. Looks pretty fun, right? Lesbian bar in 2023. Not a woman inside, just men in dresses. If you rewrite the term lesbian and allow everyone in, guess who comes in? Men. And not only that, but they will actively target and shut down gay people.
Something quite extraordinary about a police officer telling a group of gay women, you can't be on this gay pride march because you've upset some men, some trans male activists over there, and therefore you have to leave. And yet that is exactly what happened.
Throwing out the people who are aggressively targeting them because they say that lesbians don't like penises. In gay pride, nobody would have needed to carry a sign saying lesbians don't like penises because everybody knew that.
So trans activists hijacking gay pride and kicking out the literal people who started it all just because they're trying to reclaim what a lesbian is and say that they don't like dick. And the LGBT Alliance, if you're familiar with them, back when Stonewall pivoted to trans activism and gender ideology, some people were not happy with this. So they left and founded this organization, and they did it to prevent the dissemination of the lie of gender identity. And you can see why they did this. It's like they foresaw that this would happen. But trans activists, they can't just disagree with lesbians and say no. They will actively deplatform gay and lesbian people.
Jenny Watson had been running a very popular lesbian speed dating event at a pub in London for over 4 years. Recently, a male who identifies as a trans woman and as a lesbian approached Jenny and asked to attend. She politely refused, explaining that this was a social event for women. Since then, Jenny has been subject to threats and intimidation, and the new manager of the pub has seemingly colluded with trans activists to get the event shut down.
So there was some inappropriate conduct in the toilets. He was getting very close to one woman in particular. There was some touching involved.
Right.
And I spoke with him, and he wasn't very happy about that.
To our mind, it's the only thing more absurd than a man saying he's lesbian is the fact that the people that own these venues have decided that that Jenny is bigoted and unkind.
This man is clearly an autogynephile. And when you look up the history of Ray Blanchard's research, he categorizes, there's a typology of two main types of trans people, and the trans women who are attracted to other women, they largely fit in this category, Their motives to transition are entirely different. They have an erotic disposition of seeing themselves as a woman. But the issue is society has no idea of this largely. They just think people are trans. So you have a man who is aroused at the idea of himself being a woman, going into a lesbian speed dating event, inappropriately doing something to a girl in a bathroom, and then the event being shut down because of transphobia. We also see it happening in dating apps. So the app Her, earlier this year, Robin Exxon, so she's the founder and CEO of the dating app Her. You think she'd have more integrity, a lesbian herself, but she sent a message to any lesbians on the dating app who had no trans women in their bios. She insisted them to leave and said, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Lesbians themselves and gay people themselves are being brainwashed. But surely there are not real men on lesbian dating apps, right? I'll let those pictures speak for themselves. They make us see them as the gender they feel, okay. They make us accept them as a gay or lesbian, okay. But surely as a gay man, I can still hold true to only wanting to date and sleep with other biological men. This just goes to show, when as a society we give into a lie, trans women are women, full stop. If they're women and they like other women, then they're lesbians.
Whenever I mention that I'm lesbian, some people give me a confused look.
Being a trans lesbian is so silly. Like, you're really telling me that I spent hundreds of dollars on hormone replacement therapy and put incalculable strain on my relationship with my family just to dress exactly like how I dressed as a teenage boy?
Now, being a lesbian is much like being trans at the core of my identity.
I once heard that a lot of lesbians, particularly cis lesbians, initiate flirting with other women is kind of through eye contact.
So I heard lesbians and trucks were a thing, and I'm not a big fan of stereotypes, but I'm just saying.
But the honest entitlement of these people to even have the energy to go on an app and try and convince people that they should be dating them.
So if the only reason you don't want to date someone boils down to the fact that they're trans, that's transphobia right there.
No, but seriously, deciding that you don't want to be intimate with someone because of the genitals they have is transphobic. Say it with me. Genital preferences are always transphobic.
On the reduction of someone's body down to their genitalia. A dominant image of someone who is a lesbian is someone who is not interacting intimately with phalluses. Also not true. There are artificial phalluses, organic phalluses. We're asking to be taken seriously in our identities.
You refuse to date transgender folks. Is that transphobic? Now, I'm talking about people who say they accept trans people as their gender, who date people of that gender, but won't date them. Now, preference is wanting Evian bottled water over Dasani, but if you were thirsty, you would drink either one.
Let's say that you're attracted to women. Well, if you're attracted to women, then you're attracted to cis women, trans women without bottom surgery, and trans women with bottom surgery. If you're attracted to VJ, then you could be attracted to a cis woman, a trans man without bottom surgery, a trans woman with bottom surgery, or a non-binary person, which, depending on their assigned gender at birth, having or not having had the surgery. But it is that exclusion that makes it transphobic.
Is it transphobic to not want to date trans people? The answer is yes.
Gay people themselves and erasing their own sexuality.
I don't like that's a genital preference. That's disgusting to say genital preference. Please don't call it a genital preference. It's a sexual orientation.
You're saying sexual orientations. You are referring to who you are attracted to.
Correct.
When you are saying that you do not have a preference for that genital portion, that is labeled as genital preference. That's gender. It doesn't matter whether they've gone through their procedures or not. If we're dating a trans woman, it shouldn't matter whether they have a vagina or a penis.
Trans women are women regardless of where they are at in their transition.
Currently, I would say that I have a genital preference, but I would never rule anything out. I've dated non-binary people. I wouldn't rule out dating anyone who's trans. I think I'm also a very progressive and open-minded person.
Oh, okay. I get it. I just have to be more open-minded, right? I might as well just date women and have a normal nuclear family and my own kids and have a far easier time than I did growing up. Regressive. It's what society used to think. Oh, well, you can just change your mind. And it's disgusting that this girl, this they, them, is erasing her own sexuality from the pressure of trans activism and brainwashing her. They're lying to themselves. Full stop. So what are the outcomes to all this? Well, we can see that LGBTQ acceptance is on the decline. 25% of young people are now apparently LGBTQ. If this is anywhere near accurate, it is completely non-scientific. There is well-documented research on the percentage of gay people, lesbian people, trans people. We're looking at possibly no more than 3% of the entire society. But now LGBT is political, a fashion accessory to be non-binary, and no one will say this is appropriating what it means to be gay. If you're straight and not trans, not non-binary, and all these other things, and you're not close to the community, then why would you not see it from a distance and kind of be like,
that stuff is insane.
Coming from a community that is erasing our history, medicalizing and abusing kids, indoctrinating more kids in schools, and enforcing 1984-esque complete doublethink on society. Who can blame people for the acceptance being on the decline? We are actually the silent majority. That's the issue. Most people do not believe in this crazy stuff, but these narratives have been pervasive in industries such as performing arts, music, film, publishing, education, academia, and this is where a lot of influence is being had. We get so many of our ideas through media. There's no way that you could be a Hollywood movie star and publicly say, I don't believe in non-binary. And we see this overwhelmingly in the opinion polls, that most people still believe that men cannot be women and women cannot be men, and that women cannot be gay men and men cannot be lesbians. Shocker. But we're still here, people like me, lots of people, and more of us are standing up to what it actually means to be gay and lesbian, which is based in reality. And you will find that eventually the truth and reality will prevail. I really hope you enjoyed that. I put a lot of thought into it, and I do think this is a sensitive topic and a huge issue. I just want to reiterate that there are many trans people who I love and support here on YouTube, in the world. They are respectful towards my sexuality. I am respectful towards their identity and their pronoun. And if we can both do those things and ask for moderate things and also respect women and all that, and not force society to believe things that are not based in fact, you know, let non-binary people do their thing, but stop putting us together, then I think we can finally progress. But I am concerned because you now see far more people from the conservative side going back to the ideas that, you know, gay people are groomers. With all the indoctrination happening in schools, you can kind of see why, you know? And it's very sad, even upsetting to me. I really hope that things improve. I'll see you in the next one.